Now, as I promised, we're going to jump over to a Windows operating system, and we're going to look at a few of these basic commands. Okay, so here we are over on a computer that has the Windows 7 operating system installed on it. I will tell you there is nothing special about this computer, no special configuration that's been put in place. I've just installed Windows 7, and that's it. Okay, so if you want to try these commands on your own, you can do so as well. If you don't have Windows 7, if you're running Vista or XP, or maybe one of the server operating systems, Windows Server 2003, 2008, maybe you're on Windows Server 2008 R2, it really doesn't matter because they're all going to work pretty much exactly the same. So to get to this command line, right, because we talked about these are command line tools, we need to click on Start. And there's a couple different things we could do. What I like to do, because I think it's just kind of the fastest and easiest way to get there, is right here in this little search programs and files box. And by the way, if you're running an older operating system like Windows XP, you would click on Run, and then you'd get a box like this. I just type in CMD, command, okay? That's what CMD is. It opens up what's called a command prompt, and you'll see right up here, here's the command prompt. Okay, if I click on that, I get a command prompt. And this prompt, this is the command line that we're talking about. Now let me close this. I want to show you other ways that you can get there. You can also go into All Programs, Accessories, and you'll find the command prompt there. Okay, so that's another way that you can get to the command prompt. I can tell you that you can do things like pin this to the taskbar. You'll also find that if you open it enough times, you'll find it right here on your recently accessed stuff on your start menu. And the overall point is there's a lot of ways to get to this command prompt window. Another way of saying it would be the command line window. It's officially called the command prompt. You can see that right here, command prompt. But in this lesson, I've been referring to this as the command line tools, and this right here is called working from the command line. Okay, so now that you know how to get into this window, let's look at some of these commands. The first one I'm going to show you is ipconfig. So if I just type in ipconfig, it's all together, no spaces. It's not case sensitive, okay? So even though back when we were looking at the different slides, I had it all in caps, here I have it all in lowercase, but yet it'll still work. So I'm going to go ahead and hit enter. Matter of fact, let me move my arrow out of the way. Now I'll hit enter. And it shows me some information about my IP configuration. Okay, it shows me that I'm working on a domain that I've created called trainsignal.local. Here's my IP address, 192.168.10.100. I have a subnet mask of 255.255.255.0. And I'm pointing to a default gateway, or a router, of 192.168.10.1. Now you'll notice that there is another adapter that's listed here, but it's currently disconnected, so we won't worry about it. We're just going to focus on this Ethernet adapter up here. I also skipped over one piece of information, which I will point out to you right now, which is right here. It says the link local IPv6 address. We're not going to worry about IPv6 for right now, but I just want to show you that that information is there. So it's not just IPv4, but it's both IPv4 and IPv6. Now I mentioned that you can also use switches with some of these commands. So a real common switch with ipconfig would be ipconfig, put a /, and then type the word all. Watch what happens when I hit enter this time. Whoa, we get a lot more information. Matter of fact, I need to scroll back up here. We'll scroll up till I can see my ipconfig /all. Now we can see that this computer is called Video PC. I guess it's what I happen to name it. It's got a hybrid node type, which is something for WINS, which we're not going to worry about. Talks about whether routing and WINS proxy are enabled. Again, advanced stuff, don't need to worry about. Let me go ahead and scroll down here a little bit. In this section, you'll notice there's a lot more information as well. We can see our physical address, or what's also referred to as the MAC address. DHCP, whether it's enabled or not, meaning are we dynamically getting this IP address, or are we statically getting the IP address? And I do understand that there are certain things here that you may or may not understand, certain things that I'm going to cover later on in this course. Okay, so just do your best to follow along if you don't fully understand all the different terms that we're looking at. You'll see that this says yes to DHCP enabled. That means that this computer has been set up to look for a DHCP server to dynamically get its IP configuration. If it can't find one, auto configuration is also enabled. You may recall from another lesson that I talked about something called a PIPA, automatic private IP addressing. Okay, so that is enabled on this computer as well. Here's the information we already saw, the IPv6 address, the IPv4 address, subnet mask. Here's some lease information that has to do with the DHCP component. Again, we have our default gateway, but we also have our DHCP server where we got the IP address from. Here's some IPv6 information that we'll just go right past again for right now. And then here's our DNS servers, which we're pointing to, which is 192.168.1.11 and 12. Now these are servers that are providing name resolution or DNS name resolution for this computer. Okay, so you can see there's a lot more information available about our IP configuration. Now there's a number of other switches, and by the way, this is again that other adapter that has nothing to do with the actual network card that we're looking at. But I want to show you that if I type in ipconfig, and you can do this with pretty much any command, I'm going to put a /question mark. This is a way that you say help. What are my options with this particular command? And if I hit enter, oh, you see there's quite a bit of help. So let me scroll back up. I want to scroll up until I can see the command itself. They show you how it's used. Okay, so they show you a lot of different switches that can be used. But more specifically, if we come down here to where it says options, here's where it shows you all the switches and what that switch does. Another couple of real common ipconfig commands are /release and /renew. If you ever hear somebody say, did you do an ipconfig release and renew? Or sometimes they'll just say, did you do a release and renew? They'll just shorten it up. Did you release and renew? What do they mean? Well, they mean to do an ipconfig /release and then an ipconfig /renew, which is where you release your IP address that you received from a DHCP server, and then you attempt to renew that IP address from the DHCP server. Okay, so that's what those commands are. And obviously you'll see that there's also the IPv6 version as well. When you get to the point that you are troubleshooting network communication, one of the things that can help you with name resolution troubleshooting is ipconfig /register DNS, which will force the machine to register its name with a DNS server. You can display DNS information. And another real important one is the flush DNS, which is where you flush the cache, which is recently resolved names. So again, there's a number of commands here, and I'm not going to go through the entire list, but you can see that this tool is way more powerful than just looking at your basic IP information. Let me go ahead and scroll down here. You see there's a lot of information. They show you some examples of how it's used. And then we're back to our command prompt here. How about ping? Okay, so let's say I was having difficulty with name resolution. Right? So let's say I was, trying to communicate with another machine and maybe it seems like the names aren't being resolved. A good example might be I'm trying to get to certain websites and it doesn't seem to be resolving those names. Now, the first thing is you can use ping to see if it can resolve the name. So I'll give you an example. Let's say I can't get to Google. Well, I might type in ping google.com. And when I hit enter, actually let me move my arrow again so that you can see it. I'm going to hit enter. the first thing that you see is very important. It says pinging google.com, and then it puts the IP address that it is attempting to ping. Okay, so that's a great way to show you, are we resolving the name? Because I've seen where I've lost internet access. It doesn't seem like I should have lost internet access. And then I say ping Google, and it ends up coming back with an error saying it can't resolve the name google.com. The fact that it resolved the name is a good step. Then from there, it sends out these requests, and you'll notice that I got these 4 replies that came back from Google saying, yeah, I'm here. Guess what? That means we have connectivity. If I can't get to google.com through my browser, I might have a browser issue. Okay, that's why when somebody says I can't get to something, first question in my mind is, well, can you ping it? Because that will tell you whether you truly have connectivity or not. So let's say we couldn't resolve the name Google. All right, well, then let's go back and do our ipconfig/all. And here's my DNS servers, which are responsible for resolving that name. So let's see, can I ping 192.168.1.11? Right, that's my DNS server. Can I ping it? Yes, I can. It just kind of gives you an idea of where the problem could be. Okay, another thing that I could do is, well, what if I did like traceroute to google.com? Check this out. First of all, it resolved the name, right? Resolved it to an IP address. And then I'm going to start seeing the different hops. How am I getting to Google? And I know I'm getting a little bit ahead of ourselves here in the sense that we really haven't talked about routing much yet. But take a look at it. I mean, it's kind of moving as I'm talking here. Looks like it tried to go to 192.168.10.1. You may recall that that was my default gateway, meaning that's the router that I'm supposed to go to if I'm trying to communicate outside of my network. Here I have, next it jumped to 192.168.1.253. I believe that is a router within my office, still within Train Signal. Okay, so my router here in my office then sends me to another router within Train Signal, which actually sends it to, look at this, a threat management gateway 1.254. Again, I believe here in Train Signal, who then sends it out to a router out on the internet. And it's this big, long, goofy name here. I can tell you, being from the area, this stands for Rolling Meadows. That's a town in Illinois here, not far from our office. You'll notice there's Chicago. That's a bigger name. More people will recognize. So that's an internet router. Then it passes it off to another internet router, which passes it to another internet router, to another one. You'll notice it looks like they're all still staying in Illinois. Then we stop seeing these names and we break down to specific IP addresses. I don't know what those are, but they're probably routers. It eventually gets to a router down here, which then sends it to the actual server. And actually, I stand corrected. I don't believe that's the router. Let me scroll up again. No, this is the actual IP address that we were trying to get to. So this is that last step, sending it to the literal server, which is representing the website google.com. Then it says trace complete. We're back to our prompt. Pretty cool, huh? Pretty cool watching how you get from your computer, where you're sitting, out to some server out on the internet. Now, Google's not necessarily the most fun server to do because there are Google servers all around the world. There's a very good chance, since I'm so close to a big city, I'm so close to Chicago, that there's a Google server right here in Chicago. But what if you know somebody who has a website that is hosted out on one single server, and that one single server happens to be hosted on some other continent in the world? Wouldn't it be pretty cool watching all the different hops, how we're getting from my one little machine to, and in my case, I could say, let's say some web server out in Australia or out in China. It's very cool. But outside of the coolness factor, this is also a great tool within a corporate network to see where there might be a breakdown within one of your own routers. Now, I'm not going to go through all the different command line tools that we talked about in this lesson, but I encourage you to, at a minimum, go through, and let's just take ARP, for example, to type in ARP/? And read about it. Okay, you got all the help you need right here. And then start playing with it. See what it does. Okay, so if I were trying to learn this tool for myself, let's see here. ARP-A displays the current ARP entries. Blah, blah, blah. You don't need me to read the whole thing, but it's displaying the current ARP cache. Okay, so let's try that. I'm going to type in, and by the way, the reason it jumped is because as soon as you start to type, it'll take you right back down to this prompt. So I'm going to type in ARP dash. Notice it's a dash, not a slash. Sometimes they're interchangeable, sometimes they're not. -A. And look at that. There's my ARP cache. So this is a bunch of IP addresses that I've communicated with and the MAC addresses or physical hardware addresses that go with those IP addresses. Interesting. Okay, cool. And if I scroll back up and look at some more of these, what else can I do? G, same as -A. That's always funny when you see that. Well, why do you have both? I don't know. Here's -V. You see that a lot, which is in verbose mode, where you get more detail. Look at this. Look where you have the -N. That shows me that some of these switches are case sensitive. -D, -S. Okay. Go through and read what they do. Look at -D. Deletes the host specified. So if I know that I've got a bad entry, if I scroll down here, if I look and I go, wait a minute, I don't think that's right anymore. Okay. Maybe that put a new network card into that computer, and that's why we can't communicate it with it anymore. All right, well, let's get it out of there. Let's go ahead and do ARP-D 192.168.10.243. Uh-oh, it failed. Requires elevation. Well, that's kind of a bummer. What does that mean? Well, let me show you what that means. I'm going to close this command prompt window. I'm going to click Start, and this time on the command prompt here, I'm going to right-click. Okay, click the right mouse button and say I want to run as administrator. Okay, this is a new protective measure they threw into Windows 7, some of the other newer operating systems. I'll say yes, I want to allow this to happen. I'll go ahead and type my little ARP-A. I get to go ahead and see everything that I just saw a little while ago. And this time I'm going to do ARP-D for delete 192.168.10.243. And this time I didn't get any message. Well, it leaves me wondering, what happened? Did it work? Well, let's go ahead and type ARP-A again. And I want to show you another neat little thing you can do from the command line here. If you know it's a command you've typed previously, you can hit the up arrow. So I hit it once and I see the last command. I hit it again, I see the command before it. Quick way of getting back to commands that you've previously typed without having to type them again. But when I hit enter this time, notice what's missing. We have the same entries, but that 10.243, it's gone. The fact that I didn't get any message meant, oh, it worked. Okay, so that's just kind of an example of how you might work from the command line without necessarily, memorizing every single tool and knowing every little detail about what it does. Okay, every one of these tools, I went through and I gave you kind of the basic overview of what that tool would be used for. But to get right down to the detail of what you can do with it, you don't have to have it memorized. You just have to know you can hit /, and then it will tell you, here are all your options. You start reading through the options, and then you try them. And in some cases, you'll notice there's protective measures put in place where you need elevated privileges. So you run as administrator. If you're not an administrator, okay, so if I was logged onto this machine and I was not an administrator, it wouldn't just say, are you sure you want to do this? It would have said, give me the credentials of somebody who's allowed to do this. Okay, so that's why those protective measures are in place. So let's go ahead and review what we've learned in this lesson.